I don't really do drafts the way some people do drafts. I get to about 3/4 of the way through a first draft, and then I'll go backwards again. I call it the enrichment stage. So then I'll go back again and start going up again. And then I'll go back again and start going up again. There's all these layers of enrichment before I can then do the meat and potatoes at the end.
The entire book, or of individual chapters or sections?
No, the entire book, because I think other chapters inform other chapters. And so you need to really, I think, start at the beginning. Well, I do. I need to start at the beginning again. I need to work my way through again. And then I need to start at the beginning again. And then when I come to the last quarter, I leave a lot of that up in the air just so I can enjoy myself and surprise myself, because my view is that if I surprise myself, the reader's going to be surprised,
And you don't necessarily know where the story is going to climax.
Yeah, and it is more fun. Pantsing is undeniably more fun, and I don't let myself do it for most of the book.
Hey, I'm Jon.
I'm Cory.
And this is The Passage,
the podcast where authors break down their favorite pieces of writing,
taking you behind the scenes from the first spark of inspiration
to the final edits and everything in between. Jon, I know that you don't read a heck of a lot of science fiction.
That's true.
But there is a particular feeling that I get with specific types of science fiction. I've seen people call it sense of wonder, and it's the moment that you realize you're reading something and this massive universe you thought you were living in is actually a smaller box, and someone just opened the lid and you could poke your head out. And it's kind of close to a physical sensation when it's done the right way. And as far as I've experienced, it's pretty unique to reading speculative fiction. The guest that I invited on today, I would describe as having a black belt in delivering that exact sort of sensation. Tom Toner is a science fiction writer who popped up on my radar about a decade ago with his debut novel, The Promise of the Child. I was lucky enough to work on the US edition of the book, and I remember being hooked from the 10th page of the manuscript. Tom then wrote a couple great sequels to Promise, and just last year has released a new standalone novel under the pen name Caspar Geon called The Immeasurable Heaven. He writes space opera that leans so far into otherworldliness that, in my opinion, it really frequently blurs the line between science fiction and fantasy. One moment we are in a spaceship speeding across the galaxy 12,000 years in the future, and on the very next page, it's something completely different. So, Tom, I am super jazzed that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cory and Jon. Great to be here.
Let's jump right in. You have chosen something to read from your newest book, The Immeasurable Heaven. Is there anything that we need to know about where we are in the story before you start?
I don't think so. But then again, I've read some recent Goodreads reviews of this book, and maybe it's not been hugely clear. But let's see how it goes.
Let's dive in.
Right. In the silt-suspended gloom, something huge uncoiled. It scratched itself with a few lazy sweeps of its fins, scraping a peel of dead skin into the depths, before extending a tongue shaped like a fabulously intricate key and latching into the receiver. The apparatus glowed into life, startling a flitting ecosystem into the shadows and revealing the full serpentine bulk of its user in a ghostly wash of light. The interior of the water-filled space lit up with every flicker and flash to reveal a cavern of gnarled, artificial stalactites and equipment that poked like instruments of torture into the creature's lair. The Translator, hundreds of meters from snout to tail, had never seen the galaxy with its own eyes, for it possessed none. It was likewise completely deaf, as most of other species understood the term, relying instead on the single most sensitive organ for light years around, a tongue equipped with 20 million pressure receptors per cubic centimetre, a tongue it had never seen. The receiver pulsed with flowing light as the translator cycled through a wealth of options, sorting the signal vaults. Trillions of rising transmissions had been collected from the fissure in the realities as if with a giant net and left to stew, their caches of interference filtered and stored in separate branches of Obaneo Station for further analysis. Today it was moving downwards through the data stores, so to speak, into a vault that had been left unopened for millennia. The translator clenched and relaxed one of the hundreds of muscles in its tongue in rapid succession, exploring a chronological sensor chart and discovering that the signals in today's vault were pre-Thrulkan, over 500 million years old, the deepest it had ever gone. It made itself comfortable, suckling a jet of Jatsotl milk from the reservoir below the receiver while a population of tickler species went to work massaging its ancient scaly body and dialed the pressure volume to medium, looking forward to the stimulating glut of undiscovered languages it was about to sense for the very first time. The translator opened the vault, recoiling a moment later as the waters of its nest clouded with dark sulfuric blood. It shut the receiver off, yanking its tongue free and nursing it inside its mouth, every nerve howling in pain. It could only think of one sufficient word for what it had sensed. It was a scream of such intensity that 500 million years of signal decay had barely dampened it, a scream of a strength never recorded before. The older transmissions were always diluted and weak. Nothing even a tenth that antiquated had ever come through so potent, so painful. Converted into sound, it would surely deafen, perhaps even kill anything unlucky enough to be born with ears. The translator gingerly reinserted, probing carefully through the data to check the signal strengths, something it really ought to have done beforehand. There, 9,100 on the scale. No wonder its poor tongue had almost split in half. It labelled the vault as unsafe and coiled into a knot on the floor of its cavern, thinking, the nest's filtration systems already dispersing the blood. Such a signal would take colossal amounts of power to produce, whole star systems worth, the output of a widespread and successful interstellar civilization. All that power channeled straight into its mouth. Sweeping out into the passageway between the nests and down to the larger bauble beneath, the translator touched tongues with its sleepy colleague. They opened the vault again together, the pressure volume dialed down to scale 1.
Like, what? This is what I love so much about your writing, Tom, is there are 20 different ideas there that I immediately am like, I want to know more about that. That is so fascinating. And
you never see the translator again.
Wow. Amazing. What do you like so much about this passage? What does it represent to you in the scope of the book that it's from?
It's the first major passage where you get to see... So the first chapter of the book is set from the perspective of a sort of enigmatic first-person view that we get repeated throughout the book. And you don't really know who or what this enigmatic first-person view is. And then we move into the wider galaxy and we actually get to see what's going on beyond, and what the actual state of play is. And this is the first introduction into this world, which is a string of 8 connected galaxies, and it's set 3 billion years ago. And there are no people haven't been thought of. And it was just a fun sort of little intro to that world.
When you're writing something like that, do you remember what's the kernel of the scene that you can kind of hook into and get started? Or how does it work? Does it come to you sort of fully fleshed out and it's just a matter of putting it down into words?
No, I write in notebooks longhand.
Okay.
And not the prose, but just the ideas. And so
Okay.
I world build in notebooks. So it's stacks of the bloody things. For me, when you write in notebooks, it changes the way you think. It's different from typing. So I like to, have a cup of coffee, sit in a cafe and just write as much as I can. And to sort of, self-edit as I go and try and think. So my world building questions are always how and why. So there's lots of big, if someone was to look through my spidery scrawls, they'd find all these how, why, how, like I've just gone insane. And I suppose I'm very interested in the way that this book is all about the different ways in which beings perceive reality. Which is the correct reality? How is that perceived? It's all about life and death and mortality and the very nature of reality and whether one perception is not as valid as another perception of reality. And so I suppose the tongue thing and the blindness, they all have these different ways of understanding the universe, but which is the correct way? And so it sort of links into the grander theme of the book.
Do you remember what the how and the why would have been for this particular scene or for this particular character?
I'll have to dig around in quite an old notebook. I think I wrote that scene in about 2019. I was actually in France, I think, and that notebook is somewhere downstairs in a big heap.
I can only imagine how many discarded or as yet unused ideas that you sort of might have floating around.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of big notebooks on the go right now. I'm addicted to it. I just love it. I love sitting and just going to a cafe and just writing. I might just be addicted to coffee. That might be what it is. I'm not actually addicted to world building. I'm addicted to coffee. But now I can't have more than one. Otherwise I get sort of insane anxiety. But during that lovely Venn diagram between boredom and anxiety, there's this incredible kind of period of productivity. And that I'm addicted to that very narrow window.
Is it always outside the home that you're sitting and drinking coffee and working in these notebooks? Do you think is there something about, like, I don't know, being around people, being out in the world?
I know a lot of writers who don't like being around people and don't like going out, and I don't really understand that. I need to be out and about. I need to be in the world. I don't want to be at home all the time. I really don't.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's not like you're, at a cafe looking across the room and you see anything that would be of any relevance to the ideas.
In my little village, I actually there was such a small village and it's such a nice cafe that you meet everyone for the first 20 minutes, which actually can get a bit annoying, but it is really nice to see people. And then I sit down and I concentrate, and people leave me alone. But yeah, I've tried to train myself to sort of block out the noise of the coffee machine and like kids' tantrums and stuff. I don't know how, but you just lose yourself, just become absorbed, and I love it.
You have so much fun with biological beings, imagining different races, evolved races of humanity in your previous trilogy. I assume that there are tons of bizarre alien life forms in this book. It would make more sense if you were going to the zoo and looking around and like, oh, that's a great idea. What about a tiger but X, Y, and Z? Where does that start from? You're at a coffee shop and you're just sort of sitting there thinking, like, what's a really bizarre alien? What would that look like? Or what if?
So sometimes I sketch them. I do a lot of drawing. And art stuff on the side. I studied fine art at university, and so I'd like to sort of sketch them in the notebook as I go. One of the very useful things for coming up with alien ecosystems and alien world building is to watch nature documentaries. So I will sit down with a notebook. If I want to have a real kind of like ecosystem session, I'll sit down and watch David Attenborough, and I've got a few queued up for the next big thing. And keep the notebook to one side and just watch them. And you'd probably have a few ideas through there, because it's more about, I think the laws of nature are probably repeated. The interactions are probably repeated across the universe. I mean, I did a disastrous lecture on the Fermi paradox to the British Interplanetary Society a few years ago, which was so bad. It went so badly. I was heckled.
Why?
Oh, because I didn't realize it was supposed to be a lecture. I thought it was a panel event, so I turned up with no notes. And then they showed me a lectern, and I had to stand there for an hour, and I had to sort of make it up as I went along.
You just riffing.
But my main view on the Fermi paradox is that I don't know if you guys, you must have come across the Fermi paradox. And,
Explain it as if we haven't heard it.
Yeah. The Fermi paradox is, if the universe is so big, why hasn't anyone got in touch? Why have we not had any contact or heard anything? And my view is there's things called great filters. And one of the great filters could be intelligence. The universe could be teeming with life that is, just not hugely intelligent. Vast rainforests full of it. But true human level intelligence seems to have come about only once so far. Although, I mean, my next novel is all about the Silurian hypothesis, and that actually goes in the face of everything I actually believe.
What's that hypothesis?
Silurian hypothesis, the idea that because the fossil record is so patchy, and because of the vast amounts of time involved, there could have been umpteen pre-human, non-human, intelligent, advanced civilizations on this planet, and we'd have almost no evidence that they ever existed. But the previous thing, the Fermi paradox, my idea is that there is if there's only been this strike of intelligence once, that maybe it is vanishingly rare in the galaxy or in all the galaxies. But we were talking about nature documentaries, but I believe that these laws of creatures and animals and ecosystems interacting do sort of broadly fit together as a jigsaw. And I think you can come up with all these really fun, weird slants on that and still get them to fit together in a way that is consistent with a functioning ecosystem. And that, for me, is I really enjoy doing that and coming up with really sort of eccentric angles, ulterior versions of what we have here.
When do you know that you've struck gold?
I don't know. I'm sure lots of other writers have this, where you write something and you just think, that's horrible. They'll be disgusted when they read that. Yeah, I love it when I get one of those moments. But there's also the idea that we are on an exoplanet. This is an exoplanet, and any naturalist from any other world would give its eye teeth / whatever it has at the front of its mandibles to see just a glimpse of what we have here. And I think when you look around at your surroundings with a set of different lenses on, and you just think about it from the perspective of something from outside Earth, this place is just dazzlingly weird and strange. It's a really nice way to bring the wonder back into your life, to think of it in that way, I find anyway.
Tom, can I get you to read the first sentence of what you read one more time?
Yes. Just the first sentence.
Sure, first couple maybe.
In the silt-suspended gloom, something huge uncoiled. It scratched itself with a few lazy sweeps of its fins, scraping a peel of dead skin into the depths before extending a tongue shaped like a fabulously intricate key and latching into the receiver.
Yes, there's just so much information in those sentences. Did it start off there, or do you reorganize? What does that process look like?
Well, when I set out to write the chapter, I've already drafted, come up with all the ideas for it. But you can always, there are always gaps where you can add more and play around and have fun. So I don't have that sort of stage fright that some people get when they are presented with a blank page, because I know what's going on because I've done it in the notes. So I knew what this thing was, and I knew what it wanted to do, and I knew what it was looking for. When I write a chapter, I always ask myself, apart from the whole why and how with the world building, I ask, what does the reader need to know in this chapter? And then you can have as much fun as you want achieving that objective. I suppose that the fun bit at the beginning of that chapter for me was revealing this thing slowly, cinematically. The light isn't on. You just see something. And then the lights come on, and then you go, ugh.
Right.
So, yeah, so you can have fun sort of presenting things to the reader.
How many drafts does a chapter or a section like that go through?
I don't really do drafts the way some people do drafts. I get to about 3/4 of the way through a first draft, and then I'll go backwards again. I call it the enrichment stage. So then I'll go back again and start going up again. And then I'll go back again and start going up again. There's all these layers of enrichment before I can then do the meat and potatoes at the end.
Of the entire book, or of individual chapters or sections?
No, the entire book, because I think other chapters inform other chapters. And so you need to really, I think, start at the beginning. Well, I do. I need to start at the beginning again. I need to work my way through again. And then I need to start at the beginning again. And then when I come to the last quarter, I leave a lot of that up in the air just so I can enjoy myself and surprise myself, because my view is that if I surprise myself, the reader's going to be surprised.
You don't necessarily know where the story is going to climax.
Yeah, and it is more fun. Pantsing is undeniably more fun, and I don't let myself do it for most of the book. So I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and that can be less enjoyable than pantsing. But I hate wasting time and deleting stuff that I've written. I'd rather have something workable and something good that I know works on the page.
When you're going back through and you're refining, what are the things that you're looking for?
Well, I know a lot more about the world and the story and how everything works and the characters. The characters I find are built in layers. The characters, they start off as this kind of wispy idea in my mind, and they solidify and they become this sort of grey fuzzy blob, and then they start to gain color and so I find that it just needs constant cycles of enrichment to build this moving picture.
Describe that process to me again. You're writing 3/4 of the book, and then you go back to the beginning and just do another pass.
Yeah.
And you're just sort of going on instinct and filling in gaps. What is that?
I have a mental image of the book, almost like a sort of synesthetic structure in my head, a sort of colorful mass in my mind. And so you can almost sort of visualize it. And so there are elements that come in that tie together much later in the process. But I just find the enrichment process, it just makes the ending a lot better when you come to work on it. I can't actually remember how many books I've written because some of them haven't been published. But it's this process I'm still refining, I think. I'm still working on it. Just sort of make it up as you go along and see, trial and error, see what works.
It's interesting hearing you read out loud. Like there's a very, very distinct quality to the sounds of the words, even in that first few sentences that you read. Is that something you're thinking about as you're writing, or are you surprised to hear it out loud as well?
No, I like a rhythm and I like a kind of sort of mellifluous sound. But the older I get, the more I write, the less I'm interested in sort of trying to be poetic. I feel the older I get, the more I write, the more it's what you don't say than what you do. My sentences are getting much simpler as I get older, and my books are getting much shorter.
What's being cut?
They're not necessarily being cut. I'm just not waffling like I used to. I mean, when you're in your 20s and you just waffle, don't you? You're just an idiot. And now I'm in my 40th year, and I still feel like I'm like an idiot, but I'm waffling less.
Do you reevaluate any of your earlier works?
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. If for whatever reason, I doubt it, but if for whatever reason there was any call for a 20th anniversary edition of the Amaranthine books, I would definitely want to go back and look over that, because I think there's so much I'd do differently if I was to write it again. I mean, I probably wouldn't write it at all, but there's so much I would do differently if I was to write it again now. I deliberately haven't read the books since. I think I would just I'd be so embarrassed when you hear your own voice, or you see a video of you talking from years ago, or I don't know.
You hate that guy.
Oh yeah, it's just embarrassing, isn't it? It's just ugh.
Tom, I told you that actually late last year I opened those books, The Promise of the Child, up again, and I still loved them just as much as I did a decade
Cory.
ago. So
Thanks.
Now I'm even more excited to read the new one.
Do you write every day?
I try to, yes. Yeah.
Do you have a threshold, however many thousand words?
Yeah, my word count's very low, very, very low. Sometimes it's just notes. And that stresses me out. Sometimes you feel if you've not done enough that writing, or it sort of leaves you with that lingering stress throughout the day that you're not doing enough, you're not working hard enough. It's like the classic thing of being self-employed. You always feel that kind of ball of stress right in your sternum.
Jon would know what that's like, but I don't.
Do you know what I mean? The ball of stress.
It hurts just thinking about it. Yeah.
And so the way I sort of console myself is that all book work is book work. If you're thinking about the book, it's book work. If you're making the odd little scribble, it's book work. I'd rather do something that was actually improving the book than just sit and mash out a load of words that were crap at the end of the day and go, yeah, I did 1,500 words, but they weren't good, or I'll just delete them. I'm sort of getting to grips now with the fact that it's better to just, make little tweaks and tinker occasionally.
How has the process changed from what you were doing 10 years ago versus what you do now?
10 years ago, I was doing solid word counts, and I was on contract, and I wasn't stressed. Now I am never on contract, and everything is on spec, and I have no idea if it will ever get published when I write it. An uncountable amount of things have changed. I mean, I teach writing. I teach creative writing now.
That's another question I was going to ask about. What do you learn from actually teaching it?
Well, I do world building workshops a lot of time with students, and I call them the extreme world building workshops, or EU for short. And they are sort of stream of consciousness things designed to sort of stop you from second guessing yourself, to stop you from feeling sort of doubt, or to feel a stage fright. And so they're a lot of fun. I get people to shout at me, and I have to write down everything they shout at me, and then I'm constantly shouting questions at them, and then they're shouting back at me, and everyone's just screaming, and it can get really fun. But I also do one-on-one. I do sort of novel coaching and stuff, and so a lot of bouncing ideas with students, and all the way down to surgical editing of their manuscripts. I've seen it all, I think, or I feel like I've seen it all. And I hope I've got a lot of tips and tricks of the trade I can show them, after these 10 or 11 years.
Where did you get them from? Was it all trial and error? Did you have to just learn on your own?
It was just trial and error. It was just working it out as I went along. I never did any writing classes. I never did anything like that. You just sort of, it's like life. You just get bashed into a certain shape, don't you, by obstacles.
You might not have had a lot of conversations with other writers when you were starting out. Do you now? You teach writing, but do you discuss your writing habits with other people?
Surprisingly rarely. When I spend time with other writers, we hardly ever talk about writing. You just end up drinking and bitching. Yeah.
I'm still thinking about the difference between writing under contract, presumably under deadline, and writing on spec, where it's going to be up to you to figure out when the book is ready to submit or when it's ready for somebody else to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Do you think that it changed the output of the writing? Did you spend more time? Did you do more drafts when you were writing on spec because you didn't have a looming deadline? Was the process largely the same?
I enjoyed being on contract because it felt like someone was excited to read the book. I don't know whether that was true or not, but I had that in my head. And so I just got the work flowing because there was someone waiting for it. I don't think not being on contract, I'm always wrestling with the idea that, I'll be working for months or a year or more. And it was just a waste of time, no matter how many times you do it. And how many times it does sometimes accidentally succeed. It's a huge millstone, especially when you're getting older and you don't know whether you ought to be doing something different with your life. Get sort of relatives sort of going, "Oh, you're still doing a bit of writing, are you?" Like it's like you're a twat.
Does it change what you want to write about? Does writing on spec, I could see it going in either direction. Either you become hyper-focused on, shit, this thing needs to sell. I've got to come up with something that has some commercial potential here. Or maybe it frees you up to be like, I'm writing the book that I want to write. No one has paid me for this hypothetical idea.
Yeah, that's definitely what happened with that one. And the next one, actually. I only seem to be able to sell ridiculously weird sci-fi books. The stuff I write that is, I would say, more commercial, no one seems interested in.
So all of your trunk novels are the ones that you're like, I'm going to write a bestseller here, or I'm going to write something to the middle of the genre.
Not a bestseller, but just something that's just more approachable, I'd say. It's still got weird ideas. It's still ultimately a ridiculous book, but you don't find out how ridiculous it is until slightly later in the book. But no, apparently people want silliness up front, and that's all I can sell, so...
Do you think a lot about the audience as you're writing? Do you have like an audience? You don't?
Never. No, never. I don't think about anyone as I'm writing. I think if I did, I'd lose my nerve. And it's almost like a sort of tightrope. You've got to walk. You maintain that balance. I know people do think about, they have a reader in mind, or but I just don't. They just don't exist in my head when I'm writing.
Does anybody see early drafts? Who's the first person to see a draft of your work?
My agent, and I have a few beta readers who I send the books out to sometimes. But the books usually change so much that by the time the books come out, they're very different from what the beta reader and the agent read the first time around.
Because of the editor's suggestions, or because of your own revisions?
No, I write up until it's pens down. I'm one of those annoying people. I don't think you guys at Nightshade had the problem with it, but Galax, I remember, told me that I wanted to change things during the typesetting phase, and I remember I got a bollocking for that. If I could get in there after and mess around with it, then I would. But it's like an exam. It's still, you absolutely have to put the pen down.
Why do you think that is? What are you changing at the last minute?
I think it's probably like a film or a piece of art. It's never really finished. You're always tweaking and tinkering. And I remember actually someone, I think it was a writer I know, he said something once that really stuck with me. A good rule of thumb for him is that the time to stop is when you're not improving, you're just changing. And that's always stuck with me, because I think that's quite a useful thing to remember. Otherwise it'll just change forever, won't you? And it'll just keep on changing and changing and changing.
Do you have the self-awareness to know when you've hit that point?
Probably not, no. But I think there's a sense. I think it's the time when you stop making those kind of, aha! They'll be disgusted by this. Oh, that's horrible, or oh, isn't that exciting? Once you stop sort of feeling that level of excitement, and once there's a sort of vague satisfaction with what's there, then I think that's the time just to leave it there. Yeah.
Is there a piece of writing advice that you think is kind of bad?
Oh, the classic kind of kill your darlings thing. I let my darlings reproduce with each other so that they become inbred darlings. There's just this vast farm of darlings. I haven't killed a single darling. Yeah, that's the classic one. The show don't tell is tricky because I love an info dump personally, if it's an interesting info dump. And I think if it's an interesting info dump, then the whole book can be an info dump as far as I'm concerned. Some people are so dead set against info dumps, and I don't really understand why.
It's funny to hear you say that, Tom, because I would have described you as a show don't tell, and that you don't do a lot of info dumping. There's a lot of science fiction and even fantasy where the complexity of the world that you're working within, a lot of writers will revert to, and I think it's largely accepted, even if it feels a little clunky, and readers have sort of come to accept that because at a certain point there's so much new information that there's almost no good way to convey it organically. I have to work a little bit when I'm reading you. I think you're a lot more subtle.
Well, that's part of the fun when we were talking about how I started the chapter I read. It's the fun is how you're going to reveal it to the reader and how to keep them on their toes and how to maximize the potential of the information you're imparting. And that for me is a lot of fun, thinking, how can you frame this? It's almost like, choosing the angle of your camera and things, how to frame it so that you can intrigue and bring this out slowly. I don't know. I do love an info dump though. There must have been loads of info dumps in those first three. I really, really enjoy them. I'd do footnotes if I could. If I could get away with a footnote, I would love to do footnotes.
You would be like the David Foster Wallace of science fiction?
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah. I mean, I always love reading Jack Vance because he does a nice chunky footnote. And they're just wonderful. They don't take away from the experience at all.
What we were responding to when you originally started reading the passage is there's almost 20 different footnotes that there could have been in that initial passage of, I want to hear a little bit more about this. Even if it doesn't have anything to do with the story, just tell me how it works and, how the mechanics of it evolved and what it's used for.
It would just be one line and then the rest is footnotes. And then the next page would be one line, the rest is footnotes.
Do you spend much time thinking about the mechanics of a story or the components of a novel, or is it more intuitive, organic for you, just sort of telling the story, how it's kind of coming to your imagination?
I think rhythm and pacing, they're sort of intuitively built in once you read enough and write enough, I think. And so there's a sort of metronome inside you that dictates the pacing of the book. I don't concern myself with chapter lengths or anything like that. They're as long as they need to be, but they seem to sort of adhere to a subconscious rhythm. My books are getting shorter. So, yeah, like I said, I'm waffling less, or I'm just getting lazier. Or, I mean, occasionally I think to myself, am I getting like early dementia or something?
It's one of those three.
Sometimes I worry, it's one of the three. It's one of the three.
You're sort of saying that those things happen regardless of whether or not you're thinking about them. But I'm sure that there are writers out there who think about a chapter and say, okay, I need to get 500 words to set this up. Then I need another 1,000 words to, introduce
definitely
this
not.
character or something like that. That's not how you
that.
sketch
No,
out a
I
story.
think that would be quite boring. And I don't know. I didn't know people did that.
And maybe they don't. Maybe I've just outed myself as a really bad novelist.
I mean, maybe it works. Maybe it does work. Maybe it's a more efficient way to write. I don't know. Maybe the way I write is extremely inefficient. But I think with things like symbolism, I sort of pick that out at the end if there's any to be found. But I think I still kind of cringe every time I've picked a bit of symbolism out, and I think, oh, should I have done that? Is it too cringy? Should I leave it? The rule of thumb I have is that if I'm thinking about deleting it in draft 1, I will still want to delete it in draft 2 and 3 and 4. So I might as well just get over and done with and delete it in draft 1.
Ruthless efficiency.
Well, you just faffing around, you'll end up deleting it. It always happens. I'll always look at it and go, yes, I should have deleted it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a darling.
Can you give me an example of what you're talking about? As far as like, it's a bit of symbolism.
Well, I could talk about the symbolism in this one. I mean, the Immeasurable Heaven has multiple meanings. And actually, it would give away the ending.
Yeah, don't do that.
I haven't read it yet. Don't spoil it for me.
All my books have multiple meanings. The titles. Sometimes I didn't want those titles. I didn't want Promise the Child to be the title for the first book. I still don't like it, but it has so many multiple meanings that I had no choice but to use it. And then I'd still get reviewers and readers going, where's the child? Who's the promising child? And I just think, I shouldn't have used that title. I hated the title, The Way to the World, but it had to be that title. Similarly, I mean, The Immeasurable Heaven was called Pretentious by SFX magazine. The title was called Pretentious. And I just thought, but it had too many multiple, I mean, it means, it's the Polynesian word for Laniakea, our galaxy's cluster, but it's also about all the layers of reality that we discover in the book, and it's also about the perception of reality and how it can't be measured, it can't be quantified, but it's also about something at the end that's very important to do with mortality. So I had to have that title as well.
Tom, I could keep talking to you all day. I've got one last question before we get to the rapid fire. If you could have any author on this show to talk about their craft and their creative process in depth in the way that you've just done with us, who would you want to hear from?
I would resurrect Jack Vance, who's been dead for, I think, about 13 years, because I read his autobiography a few years ago, and he barely talks about the writing process. It was a wonderful autobiography. He lived a wonderful, exciting life, and he lived to be 96 or something. But all he talked about was traveling around and sailing and drinking and playing jazz. And I thought it was brilliant. It was great. But I wanted to know about his writing process. I really wanted to know more about the writing. And so, yeah, I would drag him out of the grave and drop him down here.
It reminds me of reading Keith Richards' autobiography, in which
I've read
he
that.
spends almost no time talking about the making of albums.
It's a huge autobiography as well. Yeah. I remember the only thing I really learned from Keith Richards' autobiography is the way not to OD. It's just don't up the dose when you've gone cold turkey.
Of all the things you could take away from a book, I feel like life-saving advice.
I mean, it wasn't useful advice, but I thought it was quite a good autobiography.
I remember the ending of that book as being really, really effective. He sort of circles back to a memory of his mother. It's a sort of a cliched device, but it works really well. It feels very authentic. Playing guitar when he was a little kid and his mother. I don't know why that stuck with me, but anyway. All right, should we do some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
All right. What is one aspect of writing that you think you're great at?
World building.
What's one aspect of writing you think you're bad at?
Probably, I was going to say world building as well, because I think I could get better. I don't know. I've not done this rapid fire very well, have I?
That's okay. Nobody manages to get these answered very rapidly.
It's like a job interview where they say, what are your worst qualities? And you have to say something like, I work too hard, or...
I'm going to go off the rapid fire here for a second, but is there a part of your writing process that you kind of dread secretly, that you think like, I'm going to have to deal with this at some point, but I'll just do what I like to do now?
Yeah, I don't like bringing in a new character when they're not fully fleshed out, and I don't like not knowing who they are. They feel just fake and crap, like a sort of cut out cardboard figure in the background, and that I find that very dissatisfying when they're kind of hanging around, stinking up the scene when they're not ready, when they're not developed. So I suppose
do
you could say
feel like you have to do it at a certain point anyways? Like, I have to just get this character in here. I'll go back in and I'll fill in the details.
Yes, I do. And so a lot of the dialogue sometimes it's never the final dialogue because I don't know their character well enough. So there's a lot of place holding when it comes to dialogue.
What's harder to write, the first line or the last line?
It's a really interesting question. I don't know. I would say the last line.
Quick and dirty first draft or slow and clean?
Slow and clean.
Do you miss the early days at all?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
What's a word you always misspell and autocorrect saves you?
Maneuver. I go to my grave not being able to spell maneuver.
So you talked about longhand, but when you're actually writing, do you write in a Word doc, Google Doc, some other
Word.
software platform?
Word, yeah. And I'm annoyed because I just had to pay for it again. And I don't see why you have to pay every year.
Every year for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Google Docs free.
They got
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Music, TV, podcasts in the background, or silence?
I like a ticking clock. I'm a weirdo.
Is that a real answer?
Yeah, I like just a ticking clock. I really
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
I love how you said that. Like, okay, that's not
It
normal.
reminds me of Seven, where Morgan Freeman's listening to the metronome.
Yeah. It's. I find it very soothing. Yeah.
Wow. What's the first thing you edit out of a draft?
Well, I don't know because I do my process where I re-enrich. So I can't actually tell you that. It would change with every draft.
It actually sounds like you don't do a lot of editing out. It sounds like you do a lot of editing in.
Yeah, I like to build a skeleton and then flesh it
Yeah.
out. So, and then
Yeah.
I like to bloat it, and that's really fun rather than making something and then having to shred it and tear it and make it smaller. I find that it's more fun to do it the other way.
Last question. What's your go-to procrastination method?
This sounds really boring, but I
I can't wait.
I like eating muesli. That's my naughty snack is muesli. So I'll go and have some muesli.
Explain
'Cause
that. I don't know what that is.
It's full of fiber, and it's really good for you. I'll better think of a better answer.
You won't think of a better answer than that.
Tom, thanks so much for being on The Passage.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.